Hey guys, for this week's strategy segment, I'm bringing you a calculator that I built. I actually built it quite a while ago, but it's a pretty powerful tool. It's used specifically for heads-up situations though, so sorry 6max players, but we'll have some more specific things for you in the future. Um, so the first thing is the Equilibrium BB Defense Frequency Calculator. What this basically does is it calculates how often the big blind needs to defend in order for him to not get exploited in a vacuum preflop. So, for example, if your opponent is raising to two big blinds, which is a min raise, which means he's risking 1.5 big blinds, and he's raising with 100% of hands, we must defend at least 50% of hands in order for him to not be exploiting us preflop. Similarly, if we look at if he's raising to three big blinds, then we need to defend around 38%. I'm sure a lot of people have heard these numbers before. And as we change the inputs of our opponent's raise percentage, we can see, okay, now we need to defend at least 34%, 60%, and when we go down to 25%, for all raise sizes, that's the break-even point. And basically what that means is you could literally defend no hands preflop, and as long as your opponent is raising less than 25% preflop, then you will actually be making money. You could defend no hands. Now in practice you would never do that because obviously you're going to play your strong hands that dominate your opponent's range out of position, perhaps like 10% in this situation. But I think this illustrates the point pretty well. Now, a couple of other things. This calculator is a good indicator for around how much you should be defending, but in practice we should be defending any hand that we think is plus EV to defend. So if your opponent, for example, if you have an opponent who only c-bets when he hits and then always folds to your turn leads, then you should be defending like way more than this calculator would indicate because you have a very plus EV situation. Or a guy who c-bets a lot and folds to check raises a bunch, then again you're going to have a very plus EV situation and you can defend more. WSimilarly, you could defend less than this calculator indicates if your opponent was so good post-flop that you really felt that you were okay giving him a little bit of an edge pre-flop because you needed to have a stronger range post-flop. Those are two things that could be valid. However, this gives a good idea of around how much we should be defending. But in practice, we should defend any hand that is plus EV to defend. Another thing to note is that the more hands you call with preflop, the more you should probably increase your frequency with the more hands that you call preflop. So, for example, if you're raising let's say you were 3-betting 15% and calling with 23%. Okay, 23%. Then that would add up to the 38% necessary to be defending preflop. However, when you're calling preflop, your opponent still has equity in position. So they are going to be basically free rolling on you preflop. So you might want to up your defense frequency to say 30% with the hands that you call. Anyway, these are just guidelines, and the best way to figure out what hands to defend out of position is to play around with this yourself, and then also play a lot of heads up. So the next calculator we've got here is the opening edge from the small blind. And what this calculates is the edge for the button if the big blind is defending less than the break-even amount. So basically what you're going to see here is the consequences of not defending enough hands preflop, what kind of edge the player is going to have. So, for example, if the big blind is playing 35% of hands out of position, and you're min-raising on the button, you're risking 1.5 big blinds, then you're making an average of 0.45 big blinds per hand. That means that you are making 22.5 big blinds per 100 just in a vacuum preflop versus your opponent. That's a pretty huge edge. Now, obviously, there's going to be a lot of other situations that are going to affect this. Your opponent's range post-flop is going to be much stronger than yours, so he's going to have some edges post-flop. But eventually, it's mostly going to work out to you free-rolling your opponent because of how much money you're making pre-flop. So we can see that here. So he's supposed to be defending 50%. He's defending 35%. We have a large edge. Now let's say if we're raising to 3 big blinds. Okay, so that's 5 big blinds per 100. Again, not a small edge at all. So anytime you find an opponent who will not defend enough hands versus a given raise size, you should really, really exploit that tendency. You should definitely open 100% of buttons, and if possible, you should try to get that opponent to play as many tables as possible, because this is an edge that is very steady and compiles over time with no variance. So it's pretty much one of the best spots in poker, at least in heads-up in poker, in my opinion. Whenever I can find a player who's like this, and unfortunately there's not very many of them anymore, but whenever I do, I'm really excited. That's why I'm always perplexed when people say they don't like to play nits. I mean, if you have a true pre-flop nit, man, there is no better situation. So yeah, we could play with the numbers here. Let's look at a 40% VPIP. Okay, so we'll see that. Okay, that should be in percentage. Okay, so versus a 40% VPIP, it shows that we're losing money. That's actually not accurate. It's because we do have equity, etc., etc. But basically what it means is we're not making money pre-flop. And the break-even point for 100% opens is around 38%. This is, yeah, almost exactly break-even. So, if, for example, if we're looking at a guy who plays 25% out of position, 25 big blind per 100 edge, that's pretty sick. If you're min raising, and if you can also play around with different raise sizes. If you can find an opponent who defends the same amount versus a min raise as he does versus a 3x open, then that's also a very, just an incredible spot. So anyway, so this spreadsheet is uploaded as a template on Google Documents, and I think it's a pretty powerful tool. So if you guys have any questions or you're not able to download it for some reason, leave a comment on the blog and I'll share it with you individually or try and fix the problem. Okay, so yep, if you have any questions, let me know. All right, thanks.